Hello, I am Mr. Rogers,
And I am Mrs. Froman.
and we are doing a video lecture here for Inside Cells, Chapter 1-2. And so this time you get both science features in one video, so more for your money here. In this section, guys, we're going to be talking about what's the big parts inside of a cell. So now before it was more just what is a cell. So now we talked about those advances in microscopes with the compound microscope and also with the electron microscope. We could see more and more detail of what's going on inside the cell. And this lesson is going to cover that. So, Mrs. Froman, I'll let you get started there, and I'll kind of jump in as needed there.
Okay. All those little parts inside the cell are called organelles. So that's a small structure within the cell, and it has a specific function. So the organelles have different jobs.
So is that kind of like a tiny organ, like organelle? Does that mean tiny
Yeah, it's
organ?
almost like tiny organs that are in your body.
How about it? All right.
Yeah, organelle. Then there's the cell wall. Now this is only in the plant cells. And this is a rigid, non-living material that surrounds the outside of the cell.
What does a cell wall do? Like, what's it there for?
Well, it gives it support to the plant,
Okay.
and it also has some role in letting things in and out.
Okay. So support, probably. So rigid means solid, like it's supporting it. Okay.
Yep. Then there's the cell membrane. So in a plant cell, inside the cell wall, there's going to be a cell membrane, and that regulates what's going to come in and out of the cell.
Do plant cells have a cell membrane?
Yep, plant and animal cells both have a cell membrane.
So all cells have a cell membrane. Okay.
Yes, they do.
Awesome. Good to know. Moving on to our next organelle.
We have the nucleus. This is usually towards the center of the cell, and it directs all the cell's activities. So it's a control center. And
Yeah, I was thinking, is that like the brain? That's what I'm
yeah,
thinking
it's
of,
kind
the
of like
brain.
the brain for the
Okay.
cell.
All right.
It has all the information in there. And it's surrounded by the nuclear membrane, and that protects the nucleus from the other parts of the cell.
So, and I've seen pictures of the nuclear membrane before. Is it kind of like a cell membrane, but just for like the nucleus?
It's just a cell membrane around the nucleus itself.
So that means some things can go in, some things can come out?
Yeah, it's not going to let everything inside.
Okay.
It kind of protects it. And then inside the nucleus, you're going to find the chromatin, and that's the genetic material.
So genetic material, that's DNA, right?
DNA,
DNA, all right.
exactly.
So all that DNA is inside. That's chromatin. Okay.
Then we have cytoplasm, and that pretty much fills up the cell. It's kind of like, think of it kind of like Jell-O. It's a clear gel-like fluid, and it's everything between the cell membrane and the nucleus. So it's kind of fills in the cell, kind of like the stuffing.
Oh, okay. Cool.
And then there's mitochondria, and these are rod-shaped, which means it's kind of like an oval, and that produces the energy for the cell.
What are all these little lines going through our little picture here?
Ooh, that's where all the energy is getting transferred. They're called cristae. Yeah.
And what kind of, is this a light microscope picture right here?
That's going to be an electron microscope, because we wouldn't be able to see anything that small with a light microscope.
Okay. I call these the powerhouse. All the
Yeah,
power
they
comes
make
from
all the power for the cell. Yeah. Then we have the endoplasmic reticulum. We call it ER for short. And that's an organelle that carries substances from one part of the cell to another part of the cell.
So yeah, the endo, yeah, the
Yeah.
ER, yeah. So
Yeah.
what that is that kind of like I don't know, like a highway maybe? Is that
Yeah,
kind of like
it's like the highway.
Okay,
It's a way to get things from one part of the cell to the other.
all right. I can see them here. I can see all the maze of passageways. There we go.
Yeah. Then we have the little ribosomes, and these are attached to the outer surface of the ER. Their job is to produce proteins, which are then released into the ER to be sent to other places in the cell.
So they just have one job. All they do is make proteins.
Make proteins, but a lot of different proteins that the cell needs.
Okay, and I think of it as like maybe a factory, like a protein factory. It just keeps hammering out proteins. That's all it does.
That's the manufacturing plant right
Okay.
there, yep.
Now we can see them. That's the electron microscope again, huh?
Yep, electron microscope, because they look like teeny, tiny grains of rice. Then there's the Golgi bodies. These receive proteins and other substances from the ER, and they package them up and then ship them off to other parts of the cell.
So if I was thinking like things that packages things, I'm thinking UPS or FedEx. Good way of thinking about it. Okay.
Yep, except the Golgi body uses its own membranes. If you think of if you look at that picture, it's kind of like a lava lamp. It receives things, and then its membrane surrounds it and kind of comes off.
Oh, I see it
And
happening
then
right
it
there.
gets sent into the ER to go somewhere else.
Yeah. All right.
Then there's the chloroplast. This is another thing that's only in the plants. It's a little green part that you see in the cells, and they capture the energy from the sun, and they produce food for the plant.
Yeah, I can see definitely plants only. I'm definitely not going to miss that one.
Yes,
So
don't forget that.
chloroplast, and obviously I'm guessing these green guys.
Yep,
These
all
are
those
chloroplasts.
little green guys. Yep.
All right, so that's not the cell. This is the cell wall here.
Yeah,
then, right?
that white part is the cell wall.
And all these little guys. So every cell can have lots of chloroplasts.
Yeah. Yep. Then there's vacuoles, and these are sac-like structures that store food and needed materials, and they can also be used to put the waste in
Okay.
until the cell can get rid of it.
And I think of the picture here. It's pretty big. Is that just all water inside of there?
Yeah, in a plant, they're going to be really big because another thing that supports plants is the water in the cells. If you think of a plant that you don't
right.
water, it gets all
It droops,
droopy.
yeah.
And
Happens
that's
to me a
because
lot.
it loses the water in those cells, so it
Okay.
gets droopy.
So kind of like a storage tank. I
So,
think of storage
yeah.
facilities.
So if you look in the animal cell right next to that plant cell there, yeah, right there, the vacuole isn't as big because in an animal cell, our water is stored a little differently. We don't need quite as much in our
Okay.
cells. Then we have the lysosome, and these are small and round, and they look a lot like the vacuole, but they contain chemicals that break down large food particles and old cell parts.
Okay. And I can see it here in the picture. So it's, I see digestive vacuole. So it's by digesting food?
Yeah, so it's almost like kind of like the stomach of the cell. It's going
Okay.
to have enzymes in it. It'll surround the food particle and break it down into little tiny pieces that the cell can use.
And so when I see the word like break down, and like almost like it's cleaning up old parts or breaking down food.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if a cell part gets like broken or can't be used, it'll break that down.
Okay.
Then we have specialized cells. These are structures specialized for a specific function. So an example, the picture there is, those are all animal cells, but all of the animal cells are not going to look all the same because they have different functions.
Yeah.
So,
I think of like a nerve cell. The neuron has all the different arms and the dendrites coming off, and
yeah, they're going to be like long
Long.
and skinny and,
I think about blood cell. It's just red, round, and it's
round.
meant to hold the hemoglobin, right?
right.
So we've been kind of generic with our cell, but most times they're very, very specialized to what they do. I think that's what we're trying to point out there.
Right.
And then finally,
Our little bacteria. And these are actually smaller than a cell. They don't even have a nucleus. They only contain chromatin, which again is their genetic
The DNA,
information.
DNA.
Yep. And then ribosomes, so they can make proteins.
and I can see here in the picture all the
Can't
tiny,
li-
tiny little.
those little dots
yeah.
in there. Yep.
So all they do is make proteins and have DNA. You can see.
Yep.
I guess we'll study the other parts later, right? The flagella and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And these are big or these small cells?
These are really small, smaller than most regular animal
Okay.
cells.
And is this true? They actually have a cell wall too?
They can have a cell wall because
Okay.
bacteria can form an endospore, which we'll learn about
Whoa.
later.
All right.
But it gets hard on the outside,
Okay.
and so it can live like on the desk,
Whoa.
just waiting to be passed along.
Awesome. All right, we're going to stop there, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Froman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.